Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to a new video. We're going to be ranking every single AD carry from 5 stars all the way down to the worst at 1 star when it comes to climbing anyway for the end of the season, because obviously we are getting very close to preseason. Just a quick thing, by the way, something really cool, I think anyway, QT is doing a big league thing about the new season to see what players really think about all the big changes. They're going to be showing this to a lot of important people. Chances are they're going to push this to Riot as well. So if you ever wanted to have a say, now is a really good chance. Plus, you know, free RP is always a nice thing, right? They're giving away some per question, so if you leave 5 comments answering all 5 questions, you're entered 5 times. More details down below. So a 5-star AD carry for me is something that you can pick every single game and carry as well. It doesn't really matter what the enemy team pick or what your team picks, they're always a good choice. Tristana is going to kick us off here, and she's the safest and easiest AD carry you can play right now. She's very difficult to gank, difficult to kill, but still very deadly. It's also because she can actually get ahead early. She's very good at getting ganks, like from your jungler, she can jump forward into the fight. She has good damage as well with her E. So if you play her, you really want to get your BF sword and pickaxe as soon as possible and try to get a few kills. The AD you get from that feeds into auto attacks, but obviously your E really well and does let you snowball. You want to play a bit more PvE, which sounds weird, but take towers with your E and get them before the enemy team can react. This is how Tristana actually gets so much more gold than other ADs. Most team fights are really about saving your Q for when you're going to be attacking the entire time, using your range, auto attacking, jumping away, and knocking people back with your ultimate to stay safe. The only bad thing about Tristana is her damage dealt is actually not that high for a game. It's decent in team fights, but there isn't any poke or anything before that really. You still win because of your 3+ item spike is so good and how safe you are though. Vayne is the next one, basically one of the best late game champions in the game at the moment with a new ultimate. Was already really good, but the reset mechanic is nuts. She works really well with heal and defensive supports that help her in the lane phase, plus crowd control on your team from the jungle so she can get out her damage basically. That's exactly what this meta is at the moment and why she is so good. There is no pressure early to do anything. You can actually fight and stuff, but it's not needed. You get 2 items and you are going to take off massively, and you have this outplay potential that is part of it. Even when behind, you can carry a bad team. If you find the enemy AD alone, you almost always win that, and your stealth is a massive tool to keep yourself safe. The bad part of Vayne is the shorter range compared with Twitch, Tristana, Caitlyn, so you really do have to dive into fights. It's not the same sit at the back style of crit AD as the others. Twitch is also 5 stars for me. Stupidly good late game. Different to Vayne though, because he does AoE damage with runes and his ultimate. That alone is going to win you some games. Both him and Vayne are great late game, right? But Twitch actually has one of the highest damage averages per game, whereas Vayne is near the bottom. He's also good with a lot of supports at the moment to make him stronger. Janna's shield to start fights, Lulu is the same, and the picks damage as well. Tarek's ultimate is really good. It's not just censer that they are building, it's actual synergy. There is no pressure when you play Twitch either. You can farm and win late, but once you have your first item, you want to roam around and catch people. This is actually what separates an okay Twitch from a really good one, the roaming and getting fed that way. The bad side is you are immobile and you can get punished if you get caught before fights. His roaming is what makes him OP, but if you don't do that, you won't be as strong. So now we're moving on to 4 stars, who are really good champions, like really good still, but have some obvious issue that can be abused, which means you will lose some more games. Draven is the first one, reverse of the others, insanely good early game with his passive and just takes over a game. He already has really high damage and he's going to be ahead of the curve with more items. Censer obviously gives him even more damage and keeps him alive, which used to be his biggest weakness, like getting focused in a fight. The reason he's not higher is if he doesn't get ahead, he doesn't actually do that much in a game normally. Like, he's also hard to play and easier to shut down with crowd control. You want to be fighting early and trying to get your passive gold. If you cash in, that's basically a free win and what a lot of this revolves around. It is insane, but over 60% win rate ending a game before 20 minutes. Once you get ahead, you do stay ahead and you start to 3-shot people. A few bad things, big tanks or being camped really shuts him down, and late game you are not as good as these others at all. He is a bit more of a risky pick. Xayah is the next one, who is actually just really safe. She does a lot of damage, but a lot of it is AoE damage with her feathers, not really single target. Ardent supports help her stay alive even more, but you have good farm with your feathers, which means you have good gold generation, you have more items, your ultimate is crazy, so you're hard to focus, and you even have some playmaking potential. The reason you're not higher is because you have a big dip mid-game, and that really sucks. Early she can carry with her E and some burst damage, but mid-game she is waiting for 3+ items and a W to really kick in. You want to be trying to fight early game to get a lead to offset this mid-game dip. Use your E damage, which can easily half health AD carries or censer supports. Mid to late game, you are designed designed to pump out a ton of AoE damage with your feathers and get a few clutch roots with your E. The bad side is your single target damage is actually not that strong until later, unless you set up a massive E or something like that. You're actually, though, a really good AD to have on your team if you're ahead, because you do a lot of AoE damage. Kalista is the last one in 4 stars, and a bit more of a surprise, but this video is about carry potential really. Kalista is a lot like Draven, and this is why she is permabanned at Worlds as well. She is one of the few champions who can shut down crit champs early, like censer supports buff her damage as well. They keep her alive while she does the work. She can also engage to control the game and annihilate tanks if she goes for the Rageblade build. The reason she isn't higher, even though you have all of that, is because she's way too bad when she gets behind. Censer can kind of make up for this, but late game it becomes hard when crit champions deal damage way quicker. This means you want to fight early and you want to freeze. It's kind of why I put her 4 stars. Ability to freeze the enemy out of the game. You hold the wave, you fight if they come close, and you can starve the enemy AD of CS. That gets even easier at 6. You use your ultimate to engage, even mid game as well, control objectives, and you use the lead you have. Your late game just is not good enough to be 5 stars. There is like a ticking clock on you to end the game or you'll eventually lose. That is more pressure and the cost of being so good early game. So 3 stars, really good, but maybe not every game. They have at least one very obvious weakness which stops them from carrying some games. Jinx is going to start us off, and she is 5 stars for bronze and silver, no joke. She is so good lower down the ranks. Really good at just one item for a crit champion. Her resets are actually very good, giving move speed and attack speed, and censer is crazy good with her. Her AoE damage is seriously high with her crit rockets, and she is very easy to play. The obvious weakness for her is a lack of damage outside of auto attacks. Abilities make up most of her damage early into the game. If you think of Caitlyn's Q, Tristana's E, even Twitch's E, this is something Jinx doesn't really have, and if she's behind, she won't have the items to buff her auto attacks. So because of that, you want to try and get ahead or farm very well. You take towers with your minigun very quickly, and once you get 1 to 2 items, your damage does become crazy. The bad side is you're immobile and you're pretty easy to gank. Plus, without items, she really doesn't do that much damage. Much better with the team that is ahead, so she can get these free resets which buff a lot of her damage. So Caitlyn is here, and I get asked a lot of questions about Kay, but she's just not that good early game anymore. Her late game is still insane though. She's also very safe with her range and her net. Caitlyn is actually quite a difficult champion to be really good at. At a basic level, sure, that's kind of easy, but there are a lot of tricks that make a big difference, like trap, auto attack resets, and your headshot combos. The obvious weakness is a lack of damage early. Now, fighting is really not that good for Caitlyn, and most others will pump out way more damage to start with. That means you kind of want to farm well. You want to poke with your range, try to get a few traps down and headshot towers to get gold that way instead. It is more of a PvE playstyle now compared with other ADs, which is actually a bad thing. You don't get many kills on average per game because the autos don't hurt until really late game. You do a lot over a fight, but don't necessarily pop off like Trist who resets. So Cromwell is the highest damage AD carry in the game, no doubt at all. Abuses the new censer and defensive supports better than anybody else. At least anybody else for damage. Really good at 1 to 2 items. Sure, you are decent late game anyway, but this is when you are outputting way more damage than anybody else in the game by a mile. The obvious weakness is a lack of mobility and reliance on your team. If you don't get protection and you don't have a censer support or a defensive one, the enemy team dive you, you're gonna die. The bad side is you will die a lot in games normally doing this, and mid to late game as well. You're still awesome, but like crit AD carries will have caught back up to you again, and they might overtake you. Next one is Sivir. Good with the meta picks around her, easy to play, farms like a monster. Only Draven earns more gold than her normally, and she's seriously safe as an AD. Short range and safe doesn't normally go together, but she has a spell shield, and her range isn't really an issue when you press W on a tank and it bounces through the entire team, so that's kind of why it covers it up. The obvious weakness though is a lack of damage until 3 items. The typical meme, but it's actually true. Like at 1 item, it's kind of okay. At 2, it's really not though until you get to 3 items. Now ideally what you want to do actually is shove with your W and Q, like shove the wave into tower, get mana back from your E to keep doing it, and make them miss loads of CS while under tower and actually get some tower damage. That's kind of the easy way to win really, but there's not much that you can do to outplay people or do anything crazy, I guess. You are literally there to auto attack, press W late game, press R to engage. So with Varus, better at high low where you have better teams, I think. His ultimate and damage can be used a lot more up there, and I know it sounds really weird. He's actually very good at early game, but late game it's really hard. Your range and trading makes your early really strong, but late it does depend on team play and how good you are as an AD carry. You have to have really good positioning to actually maximize your damage. The obvious weakness then is the lack of mobility and lack of damage unless you have censer and a team to let him go turret mode. With his passive, if he gets a reset, it's insane, but he can't really kite with that. So his fortune is rounding out at 3 stars, and she is better at low elo for sure, where players haven't learned to attack move yet and walk into your ultimate way more. She's actually going to be 5 stars for bronze and 4 stars for silver. That is how good she is lower down. Her ultimate damage is absolutely insane. It's AoE team wide, and she's actually one of the best early game AD carries to play because her lane phase is so strong with her Q. The obvious weakness for her is the lack of auto attack damage. She has really high burst damage, really high AoE damage with her ultimate, but that is about it mid to late game. You don't really have consistent auto damage. So if you're going to play her, you really want to bounce your Qs off of minions. You have to focus getting ahead in the lane phase. You get ahead, you get fed, you press R and watch them all melt. That's kind of the game plan. Another bad thing about Misfortune is your lack of mobility. It's not great, but at least you have your W, I guess. And your Q as well, like, does a lot of damage. As we said though, if you mess up your ultimate, you basically lose, and that is a big problem. So 2 stars have more obvious weaknesses, but there's also just a really big problem that in some games mean they won't really be able to carry properly. Jhin is the first one, and I think this might be a little bit harsh, but every Jhin I see has the exact same issues with the meta right now, and it really lets him down. The meta is not perfect for him, not even good for him. Firstly, Censer. He doesn't really use it at all. It's there for crit or auto attack reliant AD carries. Like, it makes the OP supports worse on your team, and that's not a good thing. A big reason why sometimes he can't carry properly is because it tanks. His passive mechanic does a lot more damage based on their missing health, and tanks don't really lose that much health. His ultimate could engage for sure, but like against tanks, he really does not do that well. Normally, he doesn't do that much damage and can't really get through them. If you get ahead early and you fight a lot and you use your early damage, use your ultimate as more of an engaged tool mid game, then you can still win with this guy though. Ashe can be quite good, but she's very dependent on how good your team is. If they are behind, then arrow doesn't really mean that much. When ahead though, it's an easy way to win. The obvious weakness is a lack of mobility and a burst damage. Her damage kind of takes quite a while at the moment. She also can't really carry sometimes because of that lack of damage early into the game compared to other crit champions building very similar. I kind of think that Sivir is just a better version of what Ashe does, except she doesn't have the card crowd control, but she lets her team catch them instead. Finally, in 2 stars, Lucian doesn't fit the normal formula of auto attack based AD carries anymore really, and that is what this meta is all about. His main weakness really is he's very combo reliant for damage, which is not that easy to do in proper big team fights later into the game. You also sometimes can't carry because if you build crit, you're too weak early. If you build blade and cleaver, you're too weak later. It's really hard honestly to get a good balance, and censer supports really stop him from being able to get kills early now. We ideally want aggressive fighting lanes again. You do have to bully early and get a lead, I think, as Lucian. Use the damage you have, put the enemy behind, and then group and keep fighting. For 1 star, we only have Ezreal and Corki, and these guys aren't really even AD carries anymore. Ezreal follows the same curve as a crit AD carry with his tier stacking and ramping up damage and stuff, but doesn't have as much damage as they do. So that wraps up my list and my video, but what about you? What would you change that would be different from mine? Remember to comment on QT for the chance to win some RP. Thank you for watching, but for now, let's go to the robots.